Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive today into one of the most critical yet often simplified figures in modern global affairs, Xi Jinping.
Absolutely.
Our mission is pretty direct. We need to look past those common Western labels, autocrat, dictator,
Mm.
and instead really perform an exhaustive examination, get under the hood of the true source of his power.
It's essential, isn't it, to move past that surface level? Because the stakes, well, they couldn't be higher. She leads a fifth of humanity. He's the symbol of China's massive national ambition.
And he sits right at the epicenter of this whole geopolitical balancing act, East versus West.
Precisely. And his country is right there on the cusp of achieving modernity, but crucially, on its own terms. Chinese terms, not Western ones.
So the source material we're drawing on points to a core paradox right away.
Hmm.
She projects this immense power, almost like a physical force, the master conductor image, keeping everyone perfectly in time.
Hmm.
But the material also insists he doesn't count as much as an individual person. It's more about him being the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. That's the real source of organized political power.
That's the fundamental point.
So, if the party is the real emperor, why the need for this huge cult of personality around Xi himself?
That's the contradiction we really need to grapple with today. You have to see the man and the party as inseparable, really. But they do have distinct roles.
Okay.
We can break down this enigma, his authority, into maybe three interconnected pillars. First, there's that personal force. It's a genuine confidence, a palpable sense of destiny that's projected onto him, even if that projection is, heavily engineered.
Okay, personal force. Yeah. And the second pillar, that's
Yeah.
the institutional control.
Exactly. Pillar two, his near monopoly of institutional control. And this isn't just like vague power, it's the ability to pull every significant lever of the state instantly, uniformly.
So media.
Media, military, the huge state-owned business sector, almost every corner of society. It's a level of control that's just unimaginable for most leaders in, say, established democracies.
And the third pillar you mentioned, that sounds like it's more about timing, historical luck.
Yes, the historic context. You can't understand Xi without understanding when he came to power. He inherited the CCP at this really unique moment.
After decades of groundwork by others.
Right. His predecessors, Mao, Deng, Jiang, Huaz, they spent decades making these immense national sacrifices, often really painful ones, laying the groundwork, the economic basis for what our sources are calling a period of feasting.
So China's richer now, more technologically advanced.
Exactly. The country's tech, its economic might, its global connectivity, it all converged right at a time when, at least from Beijing's perspective, the West looks distracted, fractured, maybe weakening.
Creating this massive opportunity.
A massive historic opportunity falling right into China's lap.
Okay, let's stick with that context for a minute, because understanding the apparatus he directs feels absolutely key to understanding him. If we look back at Maoist China, say in the 1970s, isolated, introspective, overwhelmingly rural.
A completely different world.
And compare it to today's China, global, tech-savvy, a major power. The single strongest link, the thread running through it all, is the CCP itself. Now, a colossal organization, 95 million members?
The continuity the party provides is just staggering. It's why many scholars argue the Communist Party itself, not any single leader, functions as the organizational emperor. It's the ultimate authority.
Like the Forbidden City analogy you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Think about it. It wasn't just the person on the throne. It was the entire bureaucratic machine, the rituals, the military apparatus. That whole system made the empire function. The party is that system today.
So the party comes first. It transcends the individual leader.
Precisely. And here's the paradox. Xi's immense personal power actually comes from his absolute, very visible adherence to the party's preset rules and ethos. An ethos established long before he joined back in '74.
He has to embody what the party wants.
He has to embody it perfectly, what the party views as strong, righteous, competent. If he deviates from that core mission, theoretically his power base is threatened.
Which explains the cult of personality again.
Yes, it makes him look like the perfect manifestation of the party's will. It masks the, frankly, bureaucratic reality underneath. He is the party personified.
It's a useful reminder, then, not to just see Xi as a return to the old imperial system like the emperors before 1912. The state he runs, the People's Republic of China, is actually quite young, right? Founded in 1949.
Fundamentally different. His power is structurally different from any pre-1949 leader. And even compared to his post-1949 predecessors, his context is unique. We really need to map those differences.
Okay, let's do that. Start with Mao.
Mao Zedong, he was the indispensable founder, almost a godlike figure who unified the country, established the state through sheer will, often violence. He had a kind of moral, revolutionary authority no one else could ever claim.
Indispensable. Then Deng Xiaoping.
Deng was the strategic genius, wasn't he? He pulled China out of that ideological isolation after Mao, set it on the path of economic reform, maybe less charismatic, more prosaic, but strategically incredibly effective in building that economic engine, even if it was often chaotic.
Then Jiang Zemin steps in.
Jiang Zemin stabilized things after the Tiananmen crisis in '89, and crucially, he navigated China's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. That really globalized China's role as the world's factory.
Which brings us right up to Hu Jintao, Xi's immediate predecessor.
Right. Hu Jintao basically perfected Deng's strategy, making China the vast factory for the world. Under him, between 2002 and 2012, China's GDP quadrupled, an unbelievable achievement.
He kept a low profile globally, focused on output.
Exactly. That was the mantra. Keep quiet, build the economy. And that immense platform, that wealth and capacity, is what Xi inherited.
So when people say she's the most powerful leader since Mao,
Well, that's partly true, but the context is vital. China itself is exponentially more significant now than in Mao's time. It simply has more money, more advanced tech, way more sophisticated military equipment compared to the rest of the world back then.
it sounds like Xi's greatest strength might not be just personal charisma, but the sheer organized capacity he was handed.
I think that's a huge part of it. And all this capacity, all this power is marshaled in service of this greater mission, which acts almost like a form of faith for the entire party.
A mission beyond any individual leader.
Totally. Xi's authority exists to serve the party's grand objective, build a strong, rich country, ensure China regains its central place in world affairs. It transcends specific leaders, policies, even economic downturns.
The sources are pretty clear on this. The CCP is officially atheist, Marxist-Leninist, but it's driven by something profound, almost theological.
Yes, exactly. Its functional creed is this almost semi-mystical entity of China itself, its history, its culture, its civilizational weight.
So Xi is like the high priest of this faith.
In a way, he's described almost like a pope guiding the faithful towards the kingdom of heaven. But the crucial difference is, this kingdom is meant to be found on earth.
National rejuvenation.
Yeah.
Tangible results.
Tangible results. It demands total commitment, no vagueness allowed. And out of all the sources of Xi's power, this zealous faith in the ultimate mission, shared across those 95 million members, is probably the most potent organizational force. It justifies everything they do.
Okay, let's shift then. How does the individual, Xi, mold himself to serve this faith, this mission? He had to differentiate himself immediately from Hu Jintao, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He was famously silent, almost robotic, the man from nowhere. Xi, from day one, shifted to this much more emotional, personal language. Echoes of Mao, actually.
This personal story, this crafted persona, it's the Xi political offer, as the material puts it.
And it's masterfully crafted. The official biography works as this perfect analogy for modern China's own story. Renaissance, testing, ultimate triumph over adversity.
It starts with privilege, though.
Yes, early privilege. He's a princeling, son of Xi Zhengsun, a major revolutionary hero, a high-ranking official, born into the elite.
But then came the fall. Disgrace. His father purged, put under house arrest in '62, the family sidelined during the Cultural Revolution's chaos.
Which leads directly to the core of the narrative. Hardship and testing. Xi gets exiled from Beijing, spends 7 years as a sent-down youth in a cave dwelling. Liangjie village, Shaanxi province. Deep poverty.
He lived the rural struggle firsthand.
Exactly. And the propaganda machine hammers this point home. It's officially branded his Yan'an time, deliberately echoing the party's heroic survival story during the Long March.
So it gives him authenticity, street cred.
Supposedly, yes, absolute authenticity, proof that he suffered with the masses, that he understands them, that he prevailed through sheer grit. And the story arc completes, naturally, with vindication and ultimate success.
And the goal of telling this story?
To embed the idea that he's not some remote, entitled elite who just inherited power, but someone who earned his right to rule through suffering, someone deeply committed to the people he lived alongside.
This connects to that everyman image they cultivated, right?
Right.
The Xi Dada or Uncle Xi nickname that briefly popped up.
Exactly. That nickname was interesting and aimed for intimacy, though the censors, ironically, later banned it for being too informal, undermining his authority. But the common touch efforts were relentless.
Like the steamed bun restaurant visit.
That's the classic example. Him queuing up, paying for his own food, chatting with surprise customers, photos flooded the media, or those images of him in a field, trousers rolled up, holding his own umbrella.
Looking like a local cadre, not the paramount leader.
Deliberately mimicking that appearance. It's relentless political stagecraft, all designed to counter any perception of him as a pampered, out-of-touch ruler.
But here's that paradox again. This carefully constructed authenticity. It clashes with other accounts, doesn't it? Like that skeptical note from WikiLeaks, supposedly from a childhood acquaintance.
It does clash. That alternative view suggests the humility is pure performance. The source basically paints Xi as a true elitist at heart, someone who believes his generation, the princelings, the children of the revolution's founders,
They're the rightful heirs.
yes, that they are the legitimate heirs who inherently deserve to rule China. From that perspective, the hardship wasn't transformative. It was just a trial he had to endure to eventually claim what he saw as his birthright.
A very different picture. And it's perhaps the sense of entitlement, or maybe just the intense desire to secure the party's legitimacy forever, that fuels his methods of control. Well, let's talk about his time in Zhejiang province, 2002 to 2007. That seems like a testing ground.
Oh, it was critical, a crucible for his later national policies. His big themes there were all about the absolute centrality of the party, the need for stability above all else, and this relentless focus on anti-corruption.
The conductor metaphor came from that, right?
Yes, he
Yeah.
used it frequently. Officials are the conductor of the orchestra. If the conductor stops, everyone just drifts off, plays their own tune. Self-serving chaos, unity lost, mission failed.
And he demanded a lot from the cadres.
Immense pressure. They had to act with faith, conviction, high morals. He wanted true believers, not cynical opportunists, just out for themselves.
Which must have sounded odd, maybe, back then. Early 2000s, China was peak economic frenzy, wasn't it?
Right.
Rampant corruption, cynicism everywhere.
It was institutionalized chaos in many ways. You had public reports detailing officials with astronomical personal wealth far beyond their salaries, officials flashing luxury watches worth years of their pay.
And that famous story, the official with 11 mistresses.
Exactly. And he only got caught because the mistresses apparently formed an alliance and denounced him together. It sounds like farce, but it showed how deep the rot was. The party genuinely risked dissolving into just a network of patronage and graft.
So she's focused on discipline, morals. It wasn't just talk.
It felt like a desperate, almost priestly effort, trying to preserve the party's moral mandate, its right to rule, protecting his church, so to speak, from its own worldly sins and excesses.
And he weaponized this moral imperative as soon as he got to the national stage, didn't he? His first really dramatic act after taking power in 2012 was that massive anti-corruption campaign, framed as a life and death struggle.
Yes, famously framed by Wang Qishan, who ran it as exactly that.
Sure.
A life and death struggle between good and evil within the party. The slogan was hunting tigers and flies.
Meaning big fish and small fry alike.
Everyone. And the scope was genuinely unprecedented since the Cultural Revolution, arguably. This wasn't just about cleaning up morals, it was absolutely a political purge as well.
Targeting rivals.
High-ranking figures fell hard. Politburo Standing Committee member Xian Yongkang, unheard of. Xi's potential rival Bo Xilai imprisoned. It reached deep into the military, too, taking down top generals like Guo Boxiong. Even the head of Interpol, Meng Hongwei, a Chinese national, was detained while visiting China.
Wow. The message was clear then. Nobody is safe.
Utterly clear. No one was untouchable. And the consequence of this huge, very public cleansing, it created this systemic, necessary sense of, well, apprehension, fear, frankly.
Yeah.
And that changed how governance worked almost overnight.
How so?
It fundamentally altered bureaucratic behavior. Suddenly, the threat of the CCDI, the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, was very real, very omnipresent.
The party's internal police?
Essentially, yes, and it forced officials everywhere to actually implement central government regulations, not just pay lip service or ignore them, which was a huge complaint during the Hu Jintao era. Things suddenly had to get done by the book.
Can you explain a bit about the CCDI's mechanics? What
Yeah.
makes it so feared?
Well, the CCDI operates largely outside the formal state legal system. That's key. Its main tool, until it was reformed slightly in 2018, was something called shuangui.
Shuangui?
It allowed the CCDI to detain party members suspected of corruption in secret locations outside the normal prison system for months, even years. No lawyers, intense pressure, complete opacity.
And after 2018,
Zhuangzi was formally replaced by Liu Xi under a new body, the National Supervisory Commission. Now, Liu Xi is technically governed by state law. It brings non-party members under scrutiny too, but in practice, it retains much of that power of secret detention and pressure.
so the lack of due process, the ability to just make someone disappear until they confess.
Or provide dirt on their rivals, yes. It creates this paralyzing fear. It's a major reason why China, for businesses and for governance, became more predictable. Rules started being enforced, but also significantly more authoritarian.
And this internal surveillance, this discipline, is then massively amplified by the tools of the digital state. Technology under Xi seems to have achieved a level of monitoring that Mao, with his neighborhood spies, could only have dreamt of.
It's been called digital totalitarianism, and maybe that's not far off, where Mao relied on, fallible humans, neighbors, colleagues, coerced family. She uses AI, facial recognition, mass data harvesting from phones and apps, constant real-time surveillance.
A lot of this grew out of fear, didn't it? Fear of instability.
Definitely. The party leadership watched the Arab Spring uprisings, saw how platforms like Facebook and Twitter were used to mobilize dissent, and they were profoundly spooked. That was a major catalyst.
Leading to the Great Firewall.
Exactly. Developed significantly under figures like Fang Bingxing, it gradually became this immense, sophisticated digital barrier, blocking huge numbers of foreign websites deemed politically sensitive or unhealthy.
BBC, CNN, New York Times.
Gmail, social media platforms, even professional sites like LinkedIn at times. To access them from within China, you need a VPN, a virtual private network. And using a VPN is itself monitored and potentially risky.
And then they formalized the state's right to access data with a specific law.
Yes, the 2017 National Intelligence Law. Absolutely critical. It uses incredibly broad definitions of national security. And most importantly, it explicitly obliges all citizens and all companies, doesn't matter if you're Tencent, Alibaba, or just a tiny startup, to provide any data the state demands.
Holding back information becomes treason.
Essentially, yes. It's treasonous not to cooperate fully. And this just completely flipped the script on what many in the West expected from the internet.
The idea that tech would automatically lead to liberalization.
Right. Instead of seeing technology as a threat to one-party rule, the CCP leadership saw cyber capacity as an enormous advantage, a harvest of data, an extra lever of power and influence far beyond what liberal democracies possess or would even consider using.
So they're constantly monitoring digital interactions, public sentiment.
Absolutely. Snooping, eavesdropping, observing everything. Compiling daily reports, analyses on public opinion, online behavior, feeding it all straight to the leadership. They've leveraged tech to achieve a level of granular, systemic control that was simply unimaginable a decade or so ago.
One project that gets a lot of attention in this area is the social credit system. Ambitious, but also maybe confusing.
The SCS is a perfect example of both the party's immense ambition and also that risk of overreaching we should talk about later. The goal is huge. A single national reputation system.
Scoring everyone.
Monitoring the financial, legal, social behavior of every citizen, every company. Rewarding good behavior, paying bills on time, volunteering and punishing bad behavior, littering, defaulting on loans, maybe even jaywalking.
But it's not quite the single, all-seeing system often portrayed in the West, is it?
Not yet, and maybe never perfectly. Implementation has been really patchy, often very localized. Different cities, different provinces have completely different scoring systems, different focuses. Some track only transport violations, others financial creditworthiness.
So it's fragmented.
Very much so. There's a lack of central clarity on exactly how local officials are supposed to implement it uniformly. Trying to knit 1.4 billion people and millions of businesses into one seamless digital network, it's proving incredibly complex. It really highlights the difficulty of applying these grand utopian theories to messy, on-the-ground reality.
Okay, let's transition now to the outward-facing goals, which he calls the new era. This focus on national rejuvenation and projecting global power. His political project seems very focused on managing the expectations of China's growing middle class.
Absolutely. The emerging middle class is now the critical stakeholder for the party. Forget traditional Marxist focus on workers and farmers. It's the urban, educated, more rights-conscious middle class whose support is paramount for stability and prosperity.
And the party needs to deliver for them.
Constantly. Their belief in the party's ability to deliver is crucial. And Xi can point to some really tangible, massive successes. Since 2012, think about it, 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. That's more than the rest of the entire world combined.
Incredible infrastructure.
A functioning space station, landing spacecraft on Mars, and officially achieving the abolition of absolute poverty defined by that international standard of less than $2.30 a day. These are big, visible achievements.
And there's also a major economic shift happening, isn't there? Moving away from just being the world's factory.
Yes, a conscious shift towards what they call dual circulation.
Fuel circulation.
It means prioritizing domestic consumption first, boosting homegrown Chinese brands, and focusing heavily on developing advanced technology domestically. The goal is to become less reliant on foreign markets and vulnerable global supply chains.
This ties into Made in China 2025.
Perfectly. That initiative aims for China to achieve global leadership and self-sufficiency in 10 key high-tech sectors: robotics, biotech, AI, new energy vehicles, aerospace, you name it.
So it's an economic strategy, but deeply political too.
Completely. She is trying to ensure the party delivers not just any prosperity, but high-quality, technologically advanced prosperity and national technological independence. That resonates hugely with national pride.
And this feeling of domestic strength, this confidence, seems to translate directly into a much more assertive global stance. Feels like the end of that old Deng Xiaoping doctrine, hide your strength, bide your time.
That's the real shift, isn't it? The abandonment of that low-key approach. She became the most traveled Chinese leader ever, making sure China was present, vocal on the world stage.
Attending Davos, G20.
Yes, and tailoring his message very carefully, quoting Shakespeare in Britain, Goethe in Germany. The underlying message is always one of profound confidence. China isn't necessarily a threat, he argues, but it absolutely demands respect. It's a friendly lion, perhaps, but definitely still a lion.
And what's fascinating is how this foreign policy seems directly linked back to that domestic mission of national rejuvenation. The Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, feels like the prime example.
The BRI is just enormous in scale and ambition. It was even written into the state constitution in 2017, signaling its permanence. Functionally, it's like this vast, sprawling free trade and infrastructure zone.
Covering how many countries now?
Well, if 80 countries have signed on in some capacity, it's geared specifically towards selling Chinese goods, Chinese expertise, Chinese infrastructure capacity railways, ports, power plants across Asia, Africa, even parts of Europe and Latin America.
It addresses a real need, doesn't it? The global infrastructure gap.
A huge gap, particularly in developing nations in Central Asia, Africa, Southeast Asia. They desperately need infrastructure, and frankly, the West hasn't always stepped up adequately or quickly enough.
So China offers financing and construction quickly.
Yes, often with fewer political strings attached, at least initially, compared to Western aid or World Bank loans. Now, of course, critics slam it. They talk about debt trap diplomacy.
Citing cases like Sri Lanka.
Exactly. The Hambantota port case is the most famous, where Sri Lanka couldn't repay the loans and ended up leasing the port to a Chinese state-owned company for 99 years. That looks really bad. But for many participating countries, the immediate need for that new railway or power grid outweighs the potential long-term risks. It's a massive projection of Chinese influence and soft power leverage.
And underpinning all this, the domestic pride, the global reach, is Chinese nationalism. The sense that China's traditional civilization is a unique asset that the world needs to respect again.
Yes, that nationalism is more. And this assertive nationalism is also what fuels the friction in, really, 3 critical areas of potential conflict.
Where are those flashpoints?
First, the South China Sea. China's been building artificial islands, basically putting permanent structures on previously submerged rocks or reefs.
To strengthen territorial claims.
Exactly. Classifying them as islands under international law gives them huge maritime claims, pushing back against neighbors like Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. It's caused major tension.
Like it.
Hong Kong. The imposition of the national security law in 2020 effectively ended the one country, two systems ambiguity. It tightened Beijing's control dramatically and sent a clear message rejecting any foreign interference.
And finally, the most dangerous one, Taiwan.
Taiwan remains the ultimate historical test for Xi, and arguably the most dangerous flashpoint globally. He has really removed the space for the strategic ambiguity his predecessors often relied on.
He's been much more explicit.
Very explicit, stating that the separation dating back to 1949 cannot persist indefinitely, that reunification is essential for national rejuvenation. And we're seeing this reflected in the constant increase in military exercises near the island. Air drills, naval patrols, probing Taiwan's defenses.
It feels like he sees reunification as a legacy issue.
Absolutely. Securing Taiwan, whether peacefully or otherwise, is viewed not just as a political goal, but as a historical necessity. Something required to cement his place alongside Mao and Deng in the pantheon of great Chinese leaders. This is where that zealous nationalism and the party's core mission could bring China into direct, sharp conflict with the U.S. and its allies.
Okay, let's talk about maybe the ultimate stress test for Xi's entire system and leadership style. The COVID-19 pandemic. It started out looking like his biggest crisis, didn't it?
It really did. There was that initial fumble, the perceived hover-up in Wuhan. Xi himself effectively disappeared from public view for a crucial period in late January 2020. Remember those headlines calling China the sick person of Asia? It looked bad.
But that narrative shifted incredibly quickly. The crisis turned into, well, a political opportunity.
Massive political opportunity, yes. Largely, you could argue, due to the perceived incompetence or chaos in the West's response. China implemented the most draconian social controls imaginable, the zero-COVID policy. Lockdowns, mass testing, travel bans.
And it worked initially in suppressing the virus.
Domestically, yes. While the West, places like the US and the UK, were struggling with delayed lockdowns, internal political fights, supply shortages, and tragically soaring death tolls, China managed to control the spread relatively quickly.
So China presented itself as the model of competence.
Exactly. It became this oasis of calm in comparison. And this allowed Xi's government to make a really powerful, if brutal, claim for political legitimacy, both at home and abroad.
What was that claim, essentially?
The argument, made both implicitly and explicitly, was, look at us, our system, our decisive leadership did more to preserve the physical well-being and basic stability of our citizens than the world's greatest democracies did for theirs.
A tough argument to counter when Western death tolls were so high.
Right. When Beijing faced criticism over the harshness of the lockdowns, the human rights concerns, they could point to their official death figures, which were, even if underreported, vastly lower per capita than in the U.S. or many European countries. Domestically, this made Xi's China look like the absolute acme of prudence and competence. The democratic world, in contrast, often looked chaotic, indecisive, irresponsible.
But despite that domestic win, COVID absolutely hammered China's global image, didn't it?
Yeah.
Relations got much worse.
Dramatically worse. Narratives about Chinese malign influence, lack of transparency, even accusations about the virus's origin became deeply embedded, especially in the West. You saw the EU formally shift its stance, labeling China not just a partner, but a systemic rival. The U.S. relationship deteriorated even further.
And this seemed to coincide with, or maybe fuel, the rise of that much more aggressive diplomatic style, the wolf warriors.
Yes, the timing fits. Wolf warrior diplomacy became the defining feature, a complete abandonment of Deng's old, keep-a-low-profile approach. Chinese diplomats became shrill, combative, hyper-aggressive online and in statements.
Any specific examples?
The most famous is probably spokesperson Zhao Lijian. He frequently made headlines with incredibly inflammatory language, like warning countries that dared to harm China's interests that they would suffer broken heads and bloodshed or have their eyes poked and blinded. It was deliberately confrontational.
Why adopt such an aggressive style? What does it achieve?
It seems to reflect this deep-seated belief within Beijing that the moral authority and political competence of the West, particularly the U.S., is in terminal decline.
So they feel they don't need to be polite anymore.
It's more than that. They sense a vacuum. They look at the West's struggles, the 2008 financial crisis, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the political polarization, the pandemic response, and they conclude the Western model is failing.
And that gives them justification.
In their view, yes. If the West had been more successful, say, in handling global terrorism or pandemics, it might have more moral standing to criticize China on sensitive issues like human rights in Xinjiang. But given the West's own perceived failures, Beijing dismisses external criticism as hypocritical, politically motivated, and simply designed to contain China's inevitable rise. They feel they're pushing back against unfair attacks.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to synthesize this. Xi's role, as the material suggests, is this conductor-in-chief. It's not just about making policy decisions.
No, it's about embodying comprehensiveness, seeing the whole picture, setting the strategic direction, the tempo, the volume for that entire CCP orchestra, ensuring absolute synchronized discipline across the military, the media, the markets, the whole bureaucracy, everyone playing from the same sheet music.
And the ultimate goal, the historical benchmark he's aiming for.
It seems clear. Making Communist Party rule perpetual, indefinite. This means achieving something the Soviet Union couldn't. Successfully managing and controlling a large, complex, middle-income economy that's deeply integrated with the world. All without ever needing to introduce Western-style liberal democracy.
If he pulls that off.
If he achieves that, he will have fundamentally challenged, maybe even overturned, what the West long considered the iron laws of political development and modernity. It would be a world historical achievement from their perspective.
But despite all the successes we've talked about, the high-speed rail, the space station, poverty reduction, this highly centralized, almost utopian leadership style under Xi seems to carry inherent risks. The sources point to three potential problems looming. Three storm clouds.
Yes, three specific future challenges. First, there's the danger of overpromising. Xi's major speeches, like that big 2017 Party Congress address or the 2021 historical resolution, they read like these incredibly ambitious, almost utopian blueprints for the future. They promise huge improvements in complex areas: mental health care, pensions, environmental quality, common prosperity.
But those are hard problems.
Immensely hard. They involve massive trade-offs, huge resource allocation fights. If the party fails to deliver convincingly on these lofty promises, especially to that crucial middle class whose expectations are rising, well, that could seriously erode the legitimacy they've worked so hard to build. Disappointment is politically dangerous.
Okay. Over-promising. What's the second risk?
Overreaching. This is the party trying to do too much, too intensively, trying to micromanage every single facet of life and the economy.
Like the social credit system we discussed.
That's a prime example. The ambition is vast, but the implementation remains patchy, confusing, inconsistent. Why? Because centrally controlling such a granular system across 1.4 billion people in a continent-sized country is just incredibly difficult. The administrative capacity gets stretched thin. The party might simply be trying to control too much, leading to inefficiency or backlash.
Makes sense. And the third risk. This one sounds maybe the most worrying historically.
Over-idealizing. This connects back to China's own tragic history. The greatest mistakes the CCP made think the Great Leap Forward famines in the late 50s, early 60s, or the chaos of the Cultural Revolution.
They weren't necessarily driven by pure evil intent.
Often not, according to many historical analyses. They often arose from what the sources call good intentions gone awry. They happen when pure utopian ideology, driven by zealous conviction at the top, collided with the messy, complex, often stubborn reality of logistics, economics, and basic human behavior.
And the risk is that Xi's vision carries the same potential flaw.
Exactly. Xi's current vision, a perfectly clean, perfectly prosperous, perfectly harmonious, perfectly loyal China, governed by disciplined, true believers, is incredibly idealistic. It carries those same historical risks of what happens when rigid, top-down theory meets the unpredictable complexities of the real world. Zealotry can be blind.
So it seems the biggest challenge for Xi's China might not actually be achieving superpower status, but figuring out what comes after the dream is achieved, surviving success.
That really is the final provocative thought we wanted to leave you, the listener, with today. Let's imagine China does successfully achieve its 2049 goal. It becomes a powerful, fully developed, prosperous, modern nation, stable democracy with Chinese characteristics, whatever that fully entails. What then?
What is the function of the CCP at that point?
Exactly. If the grand dream of national rejuvenation actually comes true, if China is strong, respected, and its people are largely satisfied, how does the Communist Party then justify its continued monopoly on total power? Explaining why a successful, sophisticated, educated society still needs an unelected Leninist party controlling every aspect of life might become the hardest ideological challenge of all.
Potentially an insurmountable one.
Potentially. Once the struggle phase is over and the promised land is reached, justifying the vanguard party's absolute rule could become incredibly complex. That might be the ultimate paradox Xi's successors will have to face.